I took a summer job watching over an almond farm after a string of thefts. Fuel siphoned from tractors, tools gone from locked boxes, copper wire stripped clean from pump sheds. The owner said it was getting worse and wanted someone on site at night. He offered extra pay if I stayed overnight. I was young, broke, and did not think much about sleeping alone on flat land that stretched for miles. I agreed and packed light. The farm sat in a dry valley where heat stayed long after sunset. Almond trees ran in straight rows, evenly spaced, their leaves thin and dull from dust. During the day, the place felt ordinary. At night, it flattened into something else. No hills, no buildings close by, just lines and open sky. Sound traveled far and then dropped off with no warning. I slept in the equipment shed near the center of the property. It was a long metal structure with sliding doors on both ends and a concrete floor stained dark from oil. The air smelled of grease, fertilizer, and old rubber. I laid a cot between a tractor and a pallet of irrigation parts. I left one light on, more to feel grounded than to see. The first night passed slow. Crickets started after dark, then stopped as the air cooled. The almond trees held heat and released it in waves. I checked the perimeter twice before midnight. Nothing moved. No lights. No engines. I locked the shed doors from the inside and lay down fully dressed. Sleep came in short pieces. Every sound woke me. Metal popped as it cooled. A mouse ran across the floor once, its claws clicking. Around 2:10 a.m., I woke to a weight on the ground outside. Not a sound at first, just pressure. Then steps, slow and heavy, placed with care. The steps passed the shed door. I lay still and listened. Breathing followed. It was loud enough to hear through the metal. Deep pulls of air, steady and strained, like someone pushing weight uphill. My first thought was a cow that had wandered in from somewhere. That idea fell apart fast. There were no cattle anywhere near the farm. No open pasture for miles. The nearest ranch sat far down the road, fenced and locked. The steps stopped outside the door. The breathing stayed close. A full minute passed. I watched the gap under the door. A shadow filled it. Too tall to be a cow. Too narrow. The shape bent at odd angles. The knees looked wrong, bent backward more than forward, like the legs had learned a different way to hold weight. The shadow shifted once, then stayed still. I held my breath without meaning to. The air felt thick. The light inside the shed hummed. The shadow did not move closer. It did not test the door. It just waited. I felt watched without seeing eyes. When it walked away, it did not follow the gravel path between rows. It went straight through the trees. I listened for branches breaking or leaves shaking. I heard none. The breathing faded. The pressure lifted from the ground. The night went quiet again. I did not sleep after that. I sat on the cot until dawn, watching dust float in the light. At first light, I walked the rows. The ground showed prints. Large bare feet pressed deep into dry soil. The toes spread wide. The heels sank hard. The stride ran straight through the trees, cutting across irrigation lines and fallen branches. The branches were pushed aside clean, not snapped. Someone had learned how to move there without noise. I found marks near a pump shed where wire had been stripped weeks before. Fresh scuffs marred the concrete. The copper was already gone, but the insulation scraps lay hidden in weeds. The footprints circled the area, then moved off toward a dry wash at the edge of the property. I told myself it was theft again. Someone scouting. Someone trying to scare me off. That explanation did not fit the way the body moved or the breathing. It did not fit the bare feet. The second night I stayed. I moved my cot closer to the door. I turned the light off and left the shed dark. I wanted to see better. The heat stayed heavy. Sweat soaked my shirt. Midnight passed. One came and went. At 2:10 a.m., the steps returned. This time they stopped sooner, right at the door. The breathing sounded worse, wet and uneven. I watched the shadow stretch under the gap. The head tilted low, then high, like it was smelling the air. The knees bent back again, locking in a way that looked painful. The shadow leaned closer, then pulled away. It walked off the same way, straight through the trees. No sound. At first light, I followed the tracks again. They led to the wash and disappeared into hard ground where water once ran. Beyond that lay abandoned land. Old orchards left to dry. Shacks collapsed inward. Rusted fencing swallowed by weeds. I found a small shelter made from scrap metal and tarp tucked against a slope. Inside lay signs of long use. Food wrappers. Empty water jugs. A pile of clothes stiff with dirt. No tools. No wire. This was not where the theft work happened. This was where someone slept. Over the next days I noticed more. Fruit went missing from low branches. Not much, just enough. Water valves were turned by hand, never broken. Fuel caps loosened but not drained. The theft slowed, almost stopped. Whoever moved through the farm did not want attention. They wanted space. The owner returned midweek to check on things. He walked the rows with me during daylight. He saw the prints. He studied the shelter from a distance and told me the land had a history. Decades ago, before the orchard spread, families used the open ground to abandon people they could not handle. Relatives with injuries, illnesses, or minds that scared them. People left with food once, then not again. Some survived by learning the land better than anyone else. He did not say more. He did not need to. I stayed 2 more nights. The steps came once more, farther from the shed. The breathing sounded weaker. I did not see the shadow again. The tracks led away from the farm and did not return. By the end of summer, the theft stopped. The shelter by the wash sat empty. The trees grew quiet again. I left the job with money in my pocket and a clear understanding of what I had shared space with. There was nothing unreal about it. Just a person shaped by neglect, moving wrong because the body had healed wrong, surviving by staying unseen. The fear came from how close that life moved to mine without crossing a line. That summer felt endless in the way only farm summers do. Heat settled into everything and never fully left. The days started before sunrise and blurred together until the calendar lost meaning. I was staying on my uncle's farm to help while he recovered from a shoulder injury. The place sat far from town, surrounded by corn on 3 sides and a low stretch of pasture on the 4th. Trees lined the edges but did not block much. The land stayed open, exposed, and quiet. During the day, the farm felt normal. Loud, even. Cicadas screamed from the trees. Equipment rattled. Cows shifted and snorted in the shade. At night, all of that dropped away. The heat lingered, but sound thinned out until every small noise felt close and important. I slept in the spare room with the window open, listening to insects and the slow breathing of the land. The first sign that something was wrong showed up mid-July. I noticed the corn along the eastern field had been flattened in a narrow line, not wide enough for a tractor and too straight for deer. The stalks were pressed down, not broken, like something heavy had moved through without caring to hide it. The path ran from the tree line toward the old hay shed, then stopped. I assumed someone had cut across the field at night. It annoyed me but did not scare me. A few nights later, the dogs refused to leave the porch after dark. They paced and whined, noses pointed toward the fields. When I tried to push them off the steps, they dug their claws into the wood and stayed put. Animals sense things before people do. I knew that. I still told myself it was coyotes or a stray dog passing through. Sleep grew harder. Around the same time each night, near 3 a.m., I woke to a faint sound outside. It was not a clear noise, more like pressure moving through grass. The sound did not rush. It did not circle the house. Passed once, then faded. I stopped getting up to check. I lay still and listened until morning. One afternoon, while checking irrigation lines near the pasture, I found something that made me stop. The grass near the fence had been worn down in a wide oval, trampled and packed. In the center lay scraps of fabric, torn and dirty, like clothing ripped apart by force. No blood, no clear sign of an animal kill, just damage. The fence wire nearby sagged low, bent inward, not broken. The cows avoided that area after. They clustered on the far side of the pasture and would not cross the worn ground. When flies bothered them, they pushed closer together instead of spreading out. One heifer lost weight fast, stopped eating and had to be moved. Stress does that to livestock. It builds until something gives. The hay shed sat at the edge of the field, old and half collapsed. I started checking it daily. Nothing inside looked disturbed at first. Then I noticed the smell. Not rot, not manure. Something sour and human, like sweat soaked into fabric and left too long. I found footprints in the dust, barefoot, wide and deep, toes splayed as if the person carried weight wrong. They led behind stacked bales and vanished. I locked the shed after that, though the door barely held. The next morning, the lock lay twisted open on the ground. The door stood ajar. Inside, the footprints were gone, swept away. The smell stayed. Heat made everything worse. July pressed into August without relief. The nights grew thick and airless. I started sleeping on the couch to stay closer to the front door. One night, the sound came closer than before. I heard something dragging across gravel, slow and steady, past the house and moved toward the barn. I stayed inside. Fear kept me still. At sunrise, I followed the marks. A long trail cut through the yard toward the barn, shallow grooves etched into dirt and stone. Whatever had been dragged left no blood, no fur, nothing to identify it. Inside the barn, the trail ended near the feed storage. One of the bins stood open. Feed had been scooped out by hand, clumsy and uneven. Rats could not do that. Neither could raccoons. I called my uncle and told him what I found. He brushed it off as trespassers, maybe kids looking for a place to hide. He told me to keep the doors locked and stay alert. He did not come back yet. His shoulder was not healed. 2 nights later, the sound returned, louder than before. I heard breathing this time, deep and rough, pulled through the nose like air struggling past something damaged. It stopped outside the house. The porch creaked under weight. The breathing stayed for a long moment. I did not move. I did not look. When it left, it moved toward the fields again, not running, not hiding, just leaving. The next morning, I found the dog's water bowl tipped over, dented hard enough to bend metal. One of the porch boards had deep gouges, like fingers dug in to hold balance. The dogs were gone. They came back hours later, muddy and shaken, tails low, refusing to look toward the fields. I made the decision to search the tree line that day. I took a tool for protection and followed the flattened paths I had ignored before. They led into a thicket where the ground dipped low and stayed damp. There, hidden under brush and old tarps, sat a makeshift shelter. Inside were signs of long use: empty cans, food wrappers, stained blankets, a pile of clothes in adult sizes mixed and mismatched. Some were farm work clothes. Some looked like they belonged to people passing through. I understood then. Someone had been living there for a long time, moving through the farm at night, taking what they needed, staying unseen. The dragging sounds were from hauling feed, tools, maybe worse. The breathing came from a body worn down by years of rough living, injury, and heat. I left the shelter as I found it and walked back without rushing. That night, I packed my things and slept with the lights on. Nothing came near the house again. The next day, I left the farm and contacted authorities from town. They searched the woods and found the shelter abandoned. No one was there. Tracks led away toward the river miles off. They told me it was likely a transient who had used the farm as cover, someone who avoided people and survived by taking small risks. They said it was common in rural areas and hard to stop. Summer ended after that. The corn was harvested. The paths disappeared under machines and dust. Life went back to routine. Still, when heat hangs heavy and nights go quiet, I remember how close someone lived to us without being seen, how the land hid them, and how easy it is for a farm to hold things you are never meant to notice. We went there for cheap beer and a place to crash. That was the full plan, nothing more. My friend said his grandpa's old tobacco farm had been abandoned for years, that no one cared about it anymore, and that the house still had a roof and floors that didn't sag too bad. It sat far enough from town that no one would hear noise. We believed him because it sounded right for where we grew up. Farms get left behind all the time when money dries up or families move on. The road in was narrow and broken, gravel thinning into dirt. We passed fields that looked wrong for summer. Soybeans grew in long, tight rows, dark and waist-high, stretching farther than they should have. There were no fences along the road, just open land and thin tree lines that did not block much wind. The air smelled green and damp, not sweet like crops usually do, more like turned soil. When we pulled up near the farmhouse, the first thing I noticed was the barn. It sat back from the house, large and low, metal siding rusted along the seams. The doors were shut tight, a new chain wrapped through the handles, clean steel with a fresh padlock that caught the light. It did not belong on a place left to rot. The house itself looked empty but not collapsed. Windows were dark but unbroken. We brushed it off as someone locking it years ago and never coming back. We carried our bags inside and set up in the living room. Dust coated everything, but there were no animal nests, no piles of droppings. The floorboards creaked but held. I noticed paths in the fields when I stepped outside to piss before dark. Not wide tractor paths, narrow lines pressed flat between rows, weaving in ways animals do not move. They cut straight for long distances, then stopped, then picked up again farther on, like someone chose when to be seen and when to disappear. Night came fast. The wind moved through the soybeans with a low, steady hiss. We drank until the edges softened and the quiet felt easier to sit in. Around midnight, the sounds changed. The wind dropped, and something else filled the space. A dragging noise started near the farmhouse. Slow, uneven, heavy enough to pull against the ground. It circled wide, scraping over dirt and stone, never coming close, never leaving. I stayed still and listened. The sound did not rush. It followed the shape of the house, passing under windows, pausing, then moving on. Whatever made it knew the space. The noise stopped just long enough to make the quiet hurt, then started again farther out. No voices, no laughter, no animal calls, just weight being pulled. Later, one of my friends went quiet and stared out the back window. He pointed without speaking. In the soybean field, far enough out that depth felt wrong, a tall shape stood upright between the rows. It was not wide. It did not sway with the wind. The leaves around it moved, brushing and folding, but the shape stayed steady. When it shifted, it stepped sideways, sliding behind the plants without bending them or leaving a trail. The silhouette stayed dark, no shine, no reflection when we moved our lights. It was there, then it was not. None of us slept. The dragging came and went until just before dawn. When the sky started to lighten, the noise stopped for good. The farm settled into morning stillness, birds picking up like nothing had happened. We went outside as soon as there was enough light to see. Our car sat where we left it, but the front tire leaned wrong. The rubber had been cut clean through, a straight slice deep enough to split the sidewall. Not a nail, not a tear from driving. A blade had done it, sharp and deliberate. The cut angled down, placed low where it would fail fast. We searched the ground around the car. No footprints we could follow. The dirt was too dry and packed. Near the edge of the field, I found a drag mark that matched the sound from the night. It ran toward the barn, then disappeared into the hard ground near the doors. The lock on the barn was still in place. The chain looked untouched. We did not wait. There was no cell service. The nearest road sat 10 miles away. We locked the house the way we found it, even though that felt pointless, and started walking. The fields stretched longer on foot. The paths between rows crossed ours at angles that forced us to step over them again and again. They felt intentional, placed to guide movement without being obvious. We stayed together, moving fast, listening for anything that matched the night sounds. Nothing followed us. The land stayed empty. When we reached the road, a farmer pulled over and took us to town. He knew the place as soon as we mentioned it. The farm had not been abandoned. It had been leased quietly for years by a man who grew soybeans and lived in the farmhouse part-time. He kept to himself and paid cash. He used the barn to store equipment and cut through the fields on foot at night to check traps he set for deer and feral hogs that tore up crops. He dragged carcasses away from the house so the smell would not settle. The tall shape was a man standing on a raised piece of equipment left between rows, using height to scan the field. He moved against the wind because he was tracking scent, not sound. The clean tire cut was a warning, meant to disable without drawing attention. We were never supposed to stay. We were supposed to leave on foot, slow and tired, carrying the message with us. We did. I never went back. I still think about how close we came to learning more than he wanted us to know. My name is Ethan Miller, and I went to my uncle's farm to help with the corn harvest after he had knee surgery. He lived alone on flat land that ran straight to the horizon, broken only by thin tree lines that looked more like borders than cover. I had spent summers there as a kid, riding on the tractor and sleeping with the windows open. Back then, the place felt wide and calm. This time, the quiet felt sharp. Sound did not fade, carried and stayed. I arrived in early October. The air was dry, the kind that pulls moisture from your nose. Corn stood high and brown, leaves curled and stiff. The house smelled like dust and oil. My uncle moved slow, favoring his leg, leaving most of the walking to me. Each morning started before sunrise. The days followed a steady rhythm of work that left little room for thought. Still, the nights stretched. The farm sat miles from the nearest town. One road cut through the land and ended at the house. After dark, there were no headlights, no engines, no distant glow, just stars and the low hum of insects. When the wind ran through the corn, it sounded like dry paper tearing. I slept light and woke often, always thinking I heard movement outside, then realizing it was only the fields settling. On the third night, I walked a fence line on the south end of the property around 9:30 p.m. My uncle stayed back, his knee swelling by evening. I carried a flashlight and wire cutters, checking for breaks where deer pushed through. The beam cut a narrow path ahead of me. The rest of the land stayed dark. Halfway down the line, I smelled something wrong. It was heavy and oily, not sharp like smoke. The light found a pile near the trees, maybe 10 feet across. I knew it had not been there that morning. The ground around it was bare and dark. The grass burned away. The pile still held heat. I felt it on my face when I stepped closer. It was not ash. It was chunks, charred pieces of something thick and uneven. Some parts looked fibrous. I pushed the light across it and saw hair tangled through the mass. Thick, dark hair, curled and burned at the ends. The smell stayed low and sweet, like cooked fat gone bad. It was not wood. I knew that without needing proof. I stood there longer than I should have. The field stayed quiet. No wind, no animals. I backed away and finished the fence without looking again. When I returned to the house, I washed my hands even though I had not touched anything. The smell stayed in my nose. I did not sleep much that night. Every sound from outside seemed closer than it should be. In the morning, I went back to the spot in daylight. The pile looked worse in the sun. I found no bones I could name, no clear shape I could explain away. The soil beneath it was baked hard. Over the next day, I noticed signs that did not fit. Near the hog pens, the dirt showed prints I did not recognize. One set came from heavy boots, larger than my uncle's, with a deep heel. Beside them ran barefoot impressions. Toes pressed wide, heels sunk deep. Whoever made them carried weight. The ground there was packed clay, not soft. The depth stood out. The hogs stayed away from that corner. They usually crowded the fence when I came near, grunting and shoving. Now they kept back. If I tried to push them closer, they screamed and scattered, eyes rolling, bodies slamming into each other. I had worked around animals my whole life. I knew fear when I saw it. I checked the locks on the barns. They were old but intact. Nothing looked forced. Still, tools had shifted. A shovel leaned where it had not before. Tarp was folded wrong. Small changes, but enough to tell someone else moved through the space. 2 nights passed without more signs. Then I returned to the tree line. The burn pile was gone. Not scattered or cooled. Gone. The soil was flattened and raked smooth. The grass around it was pressed down like someone had knelt and worked there. Whoever did it knew we had noticed. That thought settled heavy in my chest. I started sleeping with the lights off, listening harder than before. I checked the road each morning for tracks. After rain, I found them again, leading toward a drainage ditch at the edge of the property. The ditch cut deep and ran under the road through a concrete pipe. Beyond it lay abandoned land that once held another farm, now just weeds and broken sheds. I followed the ditch one afternoon. The pipe smelled damp and old. On the far side, the ground showed signs of use. A fire ring sat hidden behind brush. Not fresh, but used often. Grease stained the stones. Scraps of burned cloth lay half buried. The hair matched what I had seen before. I searched the sheds nearby. One still had a roof. Inside, I found a crude table made from a door laid on barrels. Hooks hung from a beam. The ground beneath them was dark and sticky. Flies clung to the walls even in the cool air. This was not hunting. This was processing. Slow and planned. I did not call the police right away. I watched first. I wanted to know who moved through the land and when. On the 6th night, I stayed out late, parked by the hog pens with the lights off. Close to midnight, movement caught my eye near the ditch. A figure crossed low, bent under a load. Another followed. One walked heavy. The other moved barefoot, careful and silent. They worked fast, hauling something wrapped in tarp toward the sheds. I did not approach. I stayed still until they vanished. In the morning, fresh tracks told the rest. They had used our land to move bodies from somewhere else. The burn pile was a test or a mistake. When we noticed, they adapted. I reported everything that day. Law enforcement came and sealed the area. They found more remains buried shallow near the sheds, mixed and burned to hide details. The investigation tied the activity to an illegal slaughter operation tied to migrant labor camps miles away. Workers who vanished without records, moved by people who knew how to stay unseen. The barefoot prints belonged to a man who avoided shoes to leave less trace. The boots belonged to his partner. They were caught within a week. The sheds were torn down. The ditch was filled. The land went quiet again, but it did not feel the same. When I left the farm, I looked back at the cornfields stretching flat and empty. I understood then how easy it was to hide work like that in open space. You do not need cover when no one is watching. We raised goats on a small piece of land outside town, the kind of place people passed without noticing. It was scrubby pasture bordered by cedar and mesquite, with a dry creek bed cutting the property in half. The pens were old but solid, built by my grandfather decades earlier. Welded wire, steel posts set deep, gates that had been fixed and refixed so many times the metal showed layers of different repairs. Goats were never hard for us. They were loud, stubborn, and predictable. Predators were also predictable. Coyotes left blood. Dogs left tracks. Cats left signs in the trees. What happened that week did none of that. The first goat went missing on a Monday morning. I noticed the count was off during feeding. No sound of distress during the night. No sign of a struggle. The fence along the east side bowed outward near the bottom, bent clean and even, not torn. It looked like pressure had been applied slowly, not forced. The ground was dry enough to hold prints, but there were none. No scuff marks, no drag lines. The goat was simply gone. We assumed theft. It happens more than people think. By Wednesday, 2 more were gone. Same pattern, same bent wire in different spots. Always outward, always low, always neat. No blood, no hair, no smell. The remaining goats were restless. They clustered together and avoided the edges of the pen. Their feed went untouched until daylight. They stared toward the trees even when nothing moved. I checked the fences every night after that. I reinforced weak spots with fresh wire and steel stakes. I set up motion lights that washed the pen in harsh white when anything crossed the line. Nothing triggered them. Whatever was doing it stayed just outside the range. That bothered me more than anything else. It meant patience. It meant watching. On the 4th night, I decided to stay up. I parked a lawn chair inside the pen, back against the feed shed, rifle across my knees more out of habit than intent. The air was heavy and still. Insects droned without pause. The goats settled late, shifting and breathing in the dark. I watched the clock on my phone until the numbers blurred. At 11:40 p.m., a sound came from beyond the light. It was a goat call, not a scream, not panic, just a normal sound, drawn out and lonely. It came from the tree line on the far side of the pasture, where the motion lights died and the ground dropped toward the creek. I waited for another. Came again, same tone, same pitch, but the timing was wrong. Too slow, like someone repeating something they had heard before without understanding the rhythm. The goats froze. Every head turned toward the sound. No one answered. The call came a third time, closer now, still wrong. I felt the skin on my arms tighten. I told myself it was someone messing around. Teenagers, a drunk neighbor, anything that fit. I stood and leaned forward, trying to see past the glare of the lights. Something stood just beyond the edge of the pen, where the grass met shadow. It was tall enough that its shoulders broke the line of the fence. It did not move like an animal. It shifted weight instead of stepping. It leaned forward, then back as if testing balance. When it came closer, I saw it was not on all fours. The posture was wrong. The spine angled. One leg took more weight than the other. The arms hung too long and too loose, swinging with each slow adjustment. I could not make out details of a face. The light cut off at the chest. What I saw was shape and movement. The smell reached me then. Not rot, not blood, old sweat and dirt, the kind that clings to clothes worn too long. The goat call came again, shorter this time, closer to the pen. The sound came from a throat not built for it, cracked at the end. The goats surged away from the fence and pressed against the shed. I did not raise the rifle. I did not shout. I stood there, holding still, watching something try to decide what to do next. Took another step, careful, dragging slightly. The fence did not rattle. It did not touch it. It just leaned its weight against a section that had already been weakened earlier in the week. The wire bowed outward without noise. I backed away and moved toward the house without turning around. The lights stayed on. I did not hear pursuit. I did not hear the fence give. I locked the door and stayed awake until dawn. In the morning, one goat was gone. The fence was bent in a new place exactly like before. No tracks, no blood, nothing broken. I walked the creek bed and found scraps of cloth caught on thorns. A shoe print showed once in damp sand near the water, partial and smeared, from a worn sole with a split heel, pointed away from the property. Over the next few days, I put things together that I should have noticed earlier. Food missing from the shed that I had blamed on raccoons. A tarp shifted near the old irrigation pipe. Human waste buried shallow near the trees. A trail worn down through brush that did not match deer paths. Someone had been living close by, close enough to watch us, close enough to learn the sound of goats and when we checked the fences. I contacted the county and filed reports. I installed cameras farther out, angled away from the lights. One caught an image just before dawn a week later. A man, thin to the point of sharpness, clothes hanging loose, hair matted flat to his head. One leg was stiff, foot turned out, forcing him to lean as he walked. He carried a bundle slung over his shoulder. The shape was wrong for firewood. He moved slow and steady, looking back often, staying just beyond where the lights reached. The explanation was not simple, but it was clear. Someone injured, hiding, taking what he could without noise. The fence bends made sense. The lack of tracks made sense. The mimicry made sense. He needed the goats quiet and close. He needed them alive until he could get them away. He needed patience more than strength. Authorities searched the area. They found a camp downstream, abandoned days earlier. Bones from small animals. A fire pit hidden under rocks. Medical supplies scavenged from somewhere else. No sign of the man. No more goats went missing. We sold the rest of the herd a month later. I rebuilt the fences anyway. I still walk the perimeter at night sometimes. The pasture is empty now, but the land remembers pressure. The wire holds its shape, but I know how easily it can be pushed without breaking.